Deep in the Cheddar Gorge of southwest England lies Guff's Cave, one of the most striking pieces of evidence we have for early human cannibalism. Around 15,000 years ago, during the Magdalenian period at the end of the last ice age, hunter-gatherers used this site not only as a place to live, but also as a place of unusual and unsettling rituals. Archaeologists excavating the cave have uncovered human bones bearing unmistakable cut marks, scrape marks, and fractures, the kinds of traces usually seen when butchering animals for food. Skulls, in particular, had been carefully processed, with the facial bones removed and the cranium shaped into smooth, rounded bowls. These discoveries immediately raised questions about what exactly was going on inside this cave. At first glance, it might be tempting to conclude that this was a story of desperation, starving people turning to the unthinkable in order to survive. But the evidence from Guff's Cave tells a different story. The treatment of the bones is too precise, too deliberate, to have been done hastily. Animal bones found in the same layers show the same patterns of butchery, but the preparation of human skulls into vessels seems to go beyond simple necessity. This wasn't just about extracting calories. It was about ritual. Archaeologists believe that these Magdalenian people were engaging in a kind of symbolic practice, a ceremony that involved consuming the flesh of their own dead and repurposing their skulls for use in ritual activities. The idea of skull cups is particularly striking. These carefully fashioned cranial vessels weren't just discarded leftovers. They were made with a level of care that suggests cultural significance. Some researchers propose that they may have been used in feasting ceremonies, possibly as drinking bowls during rites that involved honoring the dead, absorbing their strength, or reinforcing group identity. In this interpretation, cannibalism wasn't an act of savagery, but a meaningful practice tied to belief systems we can only partially glimpse today. The people of Guff's Cave weren't simply trying to survive, they were creating a powerful connection between the living and the dead. This paints a much more complex picture of early humans than the stereotype of brutish survivalists. What we see in Guff's Cave is evidence of culture, ritual, and meaning attached to actions that today might seem horrific. These practices remind us that ideas of reverence and respect for the dead can take radically different forms across time and place. For the Magdalenian people, cannibalism might not have been taboo at all, but rather a sacred act, one that reinforced social bonds and spiritual beliefs. In other words, the evidence from Guff's Cave suggests that cannibalism was not only about flesh, but about faith, memory, and the human need to make meaning out of life and death. In 2017, researchers announced a discovery that pushed the evidence for cannibalism far deeper into our evolutionary past. In Kenya's Turkana region, a fossilized tibia, a shin bone, from a human ancestor dating back about 1.45 million years, was found bearing unusual marks. At first glance, these marks might have looked like the scratches and scuffs left by natural forces or animal activity, but under closer inspection, scientists realized they weren't random at all. They matched the distinctive patterns of stone tool cut marks, the kind made when stripping flesh from bone. This meant that someone, long before modern humans even existed, had butchered another. What makes this finding so extraordinary is just how old it is. At 145 million years, it predates our own species, Homo sapiens, by more than 1 million years. At that time, the region was inhabited by early human ancestors such as Homo erectus. The marks on the tibia line up almost exactly with the kind of slicing one would make to remove muscle from a leg. Alongside these were other marks showing signs of gnawing, possibly from carnivores scavenging the remains afterward. This fossil provides a rare and chilling snapshot. Not only did our ancestors hunt and butcher animals, they may have occasionally turned those same skills on one another. The big question is, why? Was this an act of survival in a harsh environment where food sources were scarce? Or was it opportunistic, consuming the body of someone who had already died? The evidence doesn't allow us to say for certain. Unlike the more recent discoveries at Guff's Cave, there's no indication of ritual here. What we can say is that the behavior was intentional, and it shows that the line between prey and person might not have been as firm in our evolutionary past as we'd like to think. This discovery suggests that cannibalism isn't just a late cultural development, but may have been woven into the fabric of human ancestry itself. For scientists, the Turkana tibia forces us to confront a sobering truth. Cannibalism may not be an aberration, but a recurring theme in human evolution. The marks etched into that 1.45 million-year-old bone remind us that our ancestors were complex, adaptive, and sometimes ruthless beings. Whether out of hunger, convenience, or conflict, they were willing to consume their own kind, a behavior that would resurface again and again throughout prehistory. This makes the Turkana find not just a shocking fossil, but a vital piece of the puzzle in understanding who we are and where we came from. And as you'd expect, the practice of cannibalism carried forward into the lives of our close and recent cousins, the Neanderthals. About 100,000 years ago, a group of 6 Neanderthals, including adults, teenagers, and even children, met a violent end in Moulaguercy Cave in France. When their bones were uncovered tens of thousands of years later, archaeologists were stunned. The remains bore all the hallmarks of butchery: bones deliberately broken to extract marrow, cut marks on skulls and ribs where flesh had been sliced away, and evidence that tongues and organs were removed. This wasn't random destruction. It was methodical, and it looked almost identical to the way Neanderthals processed the carcasses of deer and other animals found in the same layers. Unlike the ritualistic shaping of skull cups at Guff's cave, the story at Moulaguercy appears to be one of survival. The region was enduring a period of harsh climate swings, with food likely scarce and winters unforgiving. To the Neanderthals, meat was meat, even if it came from their own kind. The bones tell us that the processing was efficient and thorough, suggesting that nothing was wasted. Strikingly, the evidence here indicates that cannibalism wasn't an isolated act, but a planned and systematic way to endure hardship. This pushes back against the once common stereotype of Neanderthals as brutish and thoughtless. What Moulaguercy really reveals is that they were pragmatic, adapting to the environment in the same way early Homo species had before them. They understood how to use tools to maximize calories, and when faced with desperate conditions, they applied those skills to fellow Neanderthals. While grim, this kind of evidence reminds us that cannibalism wasn't always a cultural oddity. Sometimes it was simply a matter of survival. In that sense, Neanderthals were responding to the same relentless pressures of nature that had shaped the behavior of our ancestors in Africa. Taken together with Guff's cave and the Turkana tibia, Moulaguercy gives us a spectrum of reasons for why cannibalism appears in the archaeological record. In Turkana, we see the earliest hints of butchery without clear context. In Moulaguercy, we see desperation and survival, and in Guff's cave, ritual and meaning. This pattern suggests that cannibalism has never been one single phenomenon. Instead, it has worn many faces, shaped by the circumstances of each community. By the time we reach the Neanderthals, cannibalism is no longer a mysterious anomaly, but a recurring human response to the challenges of existence. It's clear that cannibalism was far more complex than we might expect. Sometimes it was driven by desperation, sometimes by violence, and other times it had deep cultural or spiritual significance. What we learn is that cannibalism wasn't an anomaly, but a recurring theme in human history, shaped by both necessity and belief. If you found this exploration into the darker side of human prehistory interesting, don't forget to like the video. It helps others find it. I'd also love to hear what you think in the comments. Do you view these acts of cannibalism as horrifying, or as part of survival and cultural rituals? And of course, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more deep dives into the mysteries of our past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.